What the hell is this episode going to be about?
They would say stuff about my cane or make comments about my cane. Oh, you put the cane between my legs and blah, blah, blah. Down the hall, obviously, they're going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no problem calling them the C word. Well, you were talking shit about his cane first.
Exactly.
Know what I mean? Like, what are you going to really do? Really good, and I'm very happy where I am in my life right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you so much for joining this week. Today, I wanted to bring in my friend Daniel Romero. Do you want to be called Danny? Daniel?
I'm
Danny?
branding as Danny. Yeah, I'm branding as Danny.
Okay. Danny Romero, he is also a podcaster. He has a love for radio, just like me. And yeah, so I'm just really excited to get to chat with you more and kind of have you like share your story with everybody. So yeah, if you want to,
Gabby, it's cool.
introduce
Thank you for
yourself.
having me on. Seriously, because me and Gabby have been knowing each other for like, what, 3-4 years now? Like, just kind of following each other's stuff. And she came onto my podcast a year ago, and we've just been kicking it ever since, man. Just trying to, like, make something happen. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was fun chatting on your podcast. That was really awesome. So I'll definitely be linking his podcast down below so you guys can go and support him and show him some love. And yeah, are you ready? I kind of just want like to just chat with you. I mean, about whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know you love podcasting. What kind of like drew you to start podcasting?
Yeah, so podcasting was just more so my extension off of radio. So when I grew up, I knew I wanted to do radio since I was 6 years old. And about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I was trying to get into the business. And I remember asking a mentor of mine, and I was like, hey, what do you think is one of the best ways for me to get into radio? And shout out to my mentor at the time, TJ, who is such a great guy. I still call him today for anything. And he said, start a podcast, talk about what it's like to be blind and like share stories. And because that's what I was going on to radio shows and talking about was, life as a blind person and trying to give a different perspective into the world of blind people like us who navigate the world and we're independent and we go out and we live life. Like I wanted that appearance on the radio, and so his idea was for me to do a podcast that talked about that. Well, that never took off because my dream was to be on terrestrial radio, so I never really worked on that project. I more so was diving into making sure that I could secure my spot in radio, and nowadays I kind of think like, damn, I wish I should have started this podcasting earlier when I was told.
No, definitely. Like, so is that podcast the one that you originally wanted to start it? Is that something that you see yourself kind of tapping back into, or are you kind of like, nah, I don't, I kind of want to move on from that?
Eventually, so like I said, podcasting was really an extension off of radio because that's just the wave right now. A couple years ago, I met an incredible radio personality at a morning show boot camp, which is a radio convention that happens every year, and I was speaking to. They were doing a Q&A for a panel about diversity in the industry. So the panel was a few black women. So like the host of the panel was Dee Dee McGuire, who's a black female morning show host out in Texas, right? She's incredible, and her team is incredible, and one of my favorite hip hop shows around the country. I think she does an incredible job. But they had great guys up there like Shaboy, Edgar, and they had my boy Tino Cucino. And of course Frank Ski was up there, and Dana Cortez. These are big names in the radio industry, okay? Big players, guys. And I went up to ask a question about how much I should reveal about my blindness on the air. Because it's something I battled with for a very, very long time. Should I talk about being blind on my podcast or being blind on the radio? Because I don't want to be the oh, that's the blind morning show host. I just want to be a
Right.
morning show host. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
first off, they fell in love with my voice. They loved my voice. They were like, "This guy has the best voice in the room," and the room erupted. It was super cool. But Dana came up to me after the fact. Mexican woman, just incredible talent. She's a syndicated radio host. And she said, "You need to start your own podcast. And you need to do a lot of things that incorporate showing how it is to live life as a normal blind person who wants to get into this business." And she was like, use the podcast as kind of like an audio portfolio so that you can have audio out there and always have audio to present. And so once she did that, it was over. I launched my TikTok, I launched the podcast, and I started producing the podcast. I was doing it 5 days a week when I first started it. And that was a lot of work. It was really hard, but it's just me talking about the things that I love. And so, yes, to answer your question, I eventually want to take Blind Radio Guy, which is the name of my podcast and my brand, which was also Dana's idea. She was like, you need to lean into it. And that was all of their advice. Their advice was like, you need to lean into it because it's authentic. It ended up working out. And so she really kind of put the, the needle to
The
kind
bug
of,
in your
yeah, the
ear.
bug in my ear to kind of get me to go forward and do that. And it's been successful ever since. I love it.
I mean, that's really great to hear that like you obviously were so influenced by so many awesome people and surrounded yourself with people that genuinely were like, "Hey, like if this is something that you care about, which it obviously is, then here's what to do, here's what we suggest." So I think, like I said before, like your podcast is really awesome and
Thank
I've
you.
loved like hearing the things that you talk about on there. So like you want to kind of share with everybody some of the big things that your podcast really is about and like the topics that you go into or the vibes that you're
Yeah.
trying to give.
So one of the things I've always loved was like morning show type radio. I grew up listening to
Mhm.
morning radio, and it's like been one of my biggest obsessions. Like eventually, I have a big goal to produce a documentary about morning show radio and the impact it had around the country, especially in the late '90s and early 2000s. I would love to really sit down and start working on that. It's a vision I have for real, but I listened to morning show radio and I loved the connection. And I still to this day argue that there's no connection like a morning show. There's no connection like hearing other callers call and say have your same opinion on a topic, right? It's super
Yep.
cool. There's nothing like that feeling. And so I just want to create that more so with my podcast. I want to, give some of the biggest stories in pop culture, or just fun, silly stories like the time that the time that they unveiled the Oscar Mayer Wiener mobile, and like the name of the Oscar Mayer Wiener mobile is funny as hell to me. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, and I don't know, just funny stories like the one time this person. Do you remember Andre the Giant, the wrestler?
Yes.
Well, there was a very famous story about how he blew up the bathroom on an airplane.
Yeah.
And that was fun to make fun of, and talk about and bring that story back up. And then like I produced this audio bit of like Andre the Giant just taking a crap in the bathroom, right? And it was just a fun little bit, little audio piece that I made to just make fun of the moment.
Right.
And so I find like 3 or 4 stories that are really big to me, and I just give my opinion and I say how I feel about them. But now I've been also trying to incorporate other bits, notable moments, right? So I have one called Music Moment, and that's when we stop down and like give some like music news. And eventually
Yeah.
with our partnerships, I think I might pass that off to somebody else. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I said, like listening to those episodes and hearing just kind of like your commentary on these situations or these topics, like even the titles of your episodes are the funniest thing ever. Like
Yeah.
going through the titles is so hilarious, and like it kind of like pulls you in because you're like, what the hell is this episode going to be about? What, like, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? So I love that you're able to kind of pull people in by having these titles be so funny and creative. And I mean, what do you feel like with podcasting overall for yourself has been like a big challenge that you faced, while you've been making one and creating, and obviously being the only person like myself who's kind of in like wears many hats, right?
Yeah, Gabby, the answer to that really is learning how to cut through the noise,
Mhm.
right? Learning how to pivot first. First, knowing how to pivot. So if something were to happen in any direction, how are you going to recover? That's
Right.
always been one of the biggest challenges because of the limitations that we face being blind, right? We can't
Yeah.
just pick up. I do a lot of research to find out what's going to be the next buzzing social media, so that I can have real estate and make sure that I take over that name, blind radio guy on that social media site. But
Right.
we run into the limitations of accessibility. So how are we going to work through these situations that might arise if we have to make a new decision? But the biggest thing that I've had to try to learn, and I'm still learning, is cutting through the noise, how to make impact. How do I grab the attention of somebody in a world where we are in a sea of podcasts? I believe at this point the figure is between 900,000 to a million podcasts in the world.
Sheesh.
you know and this is
It's
just from a
crazy.
couple of years ago when we only had about 400, 500,000. And I don't say only as if it's a small number, but I'm saying it just goes to show how fast these directories are growing and how saturated the podcasting market goes. So cutting through the noise is the biggest thing, and that isn't just creating a good podcast. That's having good brand presence. That's being able to understand
Mhm.
SEO to down to its full core of understanding. And I'm still trying to learn SEO and how social
Same.
media works and search engine. This is all crazy to me. It's still so much.
Yeah, SEO is one of those things I don't think, as much as I try to learn it and like take in what I've been told or what I've been like taught about it, it's just one of those things that I'm like, if I had somebody else like on this team that was like
Girl, who
genuinely
you
good with it,
talking to? What?
like I would just, that would be like the main thing. So I think you're right. Like there is, the podcast industry right now is so full of different people just trying to create and put out a podcast. People like their mom, their brother, their sister, their grandma, like literally everybody, especially since the pandemic, I feel like has been like, oh, I need to make a podcast. I need to make a podcast. Like I had a friend who reached out to me towards the beginning of this year, and she was like, she's a mom and she has like I think two or three kids, and she's like, I really want to make a podcast about like being a mom and working with having these kids and da 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 whatever. And I was like, okay. So I gave her all the tools and everything, but it's one of those things where, like you said, you have to cut through all the noise. You have to cut through all of the bullshit sometimes, because there can be some bullshit. Like, let's be honest, there is a lot of things out there that's like, okay, how do I navigate this? Because it's a difficult thing, especially like seeing that we live in such a visual and sighted world. So I 100% like agree with what you said.
Yeah, and the thing more so than anything is one of my biggest projects that I've been working on the last year and a half is to launch a podcast consulting business. Because I want to be able to help people put them on the right track whenever they make a decision to run a podcast, because it's not just something you pick up. Like, this is,
Yeah.
I always say, people say that they want to start a podcast today is like, do you guys want to start a band, back in when we
Right.
were growing up, and it's because it's cheaper, things are cheap, People
Mhm.
have this idea that it's really easy to sit in front of a microphone and talk, and it's not. You either have it or
No.
you don't. And you either can produce content and be entertaining and draw people in, or you can't. And that's okay, but I don't like the fact that it gets saturated, but that's just the way of the world, right? Technology is going to have that. It happened with the music industry. We saw
Yep.
how impossible or how much money it costs to have music equipment back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And then the early 2000s to 2010s came around, and my God, you can buy a laptop for $200 and
Yep.
throw a crappy program on there and make a beat and make a song. And I mean, it happened. Soldier Boy did it. Soldier Boy did it in 2007, and it broke things, right? It broke everything.
Yeah.
And so it just goes to show that technology is always going to kind of cheapen things. So it's really important what you do with the content. It's important what you do, and that's my biggest tidbit to people is when you start a podcast, don't think about it as I'm going to start a podcast to sell this podcast. Think about it as I'm going to start this podcast to sell this content and this community that I'm going to build. Because it's not about the podcast and it's not about the actual thing you're doing anymore. It's not about your stream. It's not about your podcast. It's about the
No.
community that you build around it.
I 100% love that you said that because I think that the lines can get really blurred when people start kind of trying to get into this and creating, and I also want you to share with everyone what you said to me the other day about how, not everybody can be in the front, like, sit behind a microphone or a camera. Like, some people have to understand that it's okay to also be in the background helping to produce these things. So, like, can you also share like that? Because I thought that was really crucial. Because again, those lines get blurred, and sometimes people try to think that, oh, I can do this, and that's not to say that they can't, but I think, like you said, it's a saturated industry now where it's not as easy as people try to make it out to be. So I would love
Cement
for you
your
to kind of share that.
place.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Cement your place, right?
Hmm.
Understand that sometimes there's just way too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's way too many people who want to be the star on camera. Sometimes there's way too many people who want to be the front and center of any project. But sometimes it's totally okay to accept and recognize that being the supporting role, the supporting actor, is really helpful too. And that supporting actor in a movie, think about it as like a movie, right? The supporting actor in a movie gets to shine sometimes throughout the movie,
Right.
but they're supporting the actor. You know what I'm saying? The main character. And I think sometimes you can really get some great results out of a project if you really understand that your hand as somebody behind the scenes or somebody as a supporting role can really, really elevate the person who is on camera, and you should be proud of that. You should pat yourself on the back for that.
I mean, I just think the messaging behind that is so important because I think that, again, it's hard to even try to, like, there's been moments in my own life with content creation and making a podcast where I've had to be like, this one thing, like, that's not my expertise, that's not where I believe I shine.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot to understand those points of like, okay, this is where I shine, this is where I can step in and, put my skills to the test. And then there's other areas where I'm like, I'm not the greatest with like editing, for instance, like I'm the most basic editor that you could ever, like, pick to help edit something, but like I can do it, but that doesn't mean I'll be able to do all the visual things. And that's one of those things where I know that that's somebody else's, position. That's where somebody else steps in and they're like, oh, well, if that's a difficult thing for you, this is how I'm able to kind of do X, Y, and Z. And so I think learning about kind of where we sit when it comes to the things that we put out into the world and the things that we believe are our expertise and what we call our expertise, because it's easy to say, yeah, I'm a great editor, but sometimes, you know and I'll just share like a quick story. Like,
Yeah.
for me, I've been doing content creation since late 2018, but like really 2019. And like that journey has been hell. Like it hasn't been the easiest thing for me. It's been a lot of fun and I've enjoyed like getting to sit
I've
down in
seen
front
you
of a
though.
camera.
I know how hard it is, and I have a lot of respect for you, Gabby, because you really you haven't stopped. I've seen you rebrand a few times, and I've seen you, but that's part of the game, man. That's part of the game, and you're literally doing what I was doing from the same ages, from what 21 to 25.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, I
that's when you're
mean,
supposed to learn, though. I don't think you're
yeah.
doing it wrong. I think it has pressure sometimes just because of how fast other things grow. When you see somebody launch something and you're like, how the hell did this get 20,000 views on it?
Yes.
And it's kind of discouraging because it's like, damn, I've tried to put out a couple things that I want people to touch and nothing happens. So the discouraging part is the fact that you feel like you're trying to play catch up in a time where it's
Yeah.
already saturated. But you're not doing anything different from what the average 21-year-old who's still trying to figure this out is doing. We rebrand a lot. I had my morning I had my not my morning show, but I had a night show that I had built from the ground up when I was 19 years old, and the show
Mhm.
disbanded, and I lost my show. Uh, but then I started learning how to do actual terrestrial radio. I started learning how to voice track. And then after I was voice tracking is when I actually started doing live radio and actually doing a fun morning show out in Gainesville. And so like all of this is stepping stones. Nobody really knew me. I went by a few different names on the air. I finally settled full time with Romero because it was a name that was given. It was my last name, and it was a name that was given to me by a program director for a small station I had done about 11 years ago. It was a small internet station out of St. Louis, and the guy was like, "You need a radio name," and I was like, I don't know what to do. A radio name? I was blind DJ Dan. You know what I mean?"
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and yeah, like that's so it's so important because like I was saying, like it's been one of those things where yeah, it's been a very difficult journey, but I agree, like it's taught me so much about how to even make content as someone who like we said, like this world is very visual. And so living in a very sighted and visual world, you sometimes have to figure out like how do I adapt to that? How do I, where is it that I feel is something that I can do or I can change that's going to help me to make this content because I'll be honest like I love making content. It's so fun for me. I love being able to sit down in front of the camera or vlog even though like maybe it's not perfect, but it's one of those things where I had to learn when I was starting out. There would be moments where I was like, I'm quitting this. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
done. I don't care anymore. Like people don't like me, which is fine. Like, but I was like, people
Yeah.
don't vibe with my content, which is okay. But like it took me a long time to realize that because I had like my cousins who would I would tell this to, and they'd be like, listen, you have to remember people come to your content because you have something that maybe another person doesn't have. And so I think through constantly hearing that and constantly hearing that, like, it's, this content, like, yeah, a bunch of people are making the same or similar content, but like, there's something different about the way I create content. And like, that took me, what, probably a year or no, not a year, like 3 years or so to
Mm-hmm.
figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it's just one of those things where sometimes we go through these journeys and it's like, damn, this is so hard and it's so stressful and I don't have somebody else here to help edit or to help do X, Y, and Z. But I think along the way, like it teaches us so much about how to even be in those spaces because then you meet people that are like, "Oh, well, I don't know how to do, like Danny's really good with audio, editing." And so like maybe I'll go to him and be like, "Hey, I suck at this. Like how do I do this? Or can you help me with this?" And so I think it's just about building up people with
Those
with
talents.
having that support around you,
Yeah,
you know what I
with
mean? So
those
yeah.
talents for sure. And I agree with you. I also think that there is a problem in smaller communities and smaller spaces.
Mhm.
We deal with it in the blind world where there's this feeling of there can only be one in each area that makes it.
Yes.
And I think that's BS. You know what I'm saying? I think that's pure BS. I think there's
Agreed.
plenty of money to go around. There is plenty of content to be made. There are plenty of people in the world who have computers and devices who can see our stuff now. This is not like when we were growing up and they were just limited to the radio stations and the TV stations that they had near us. We're global. We have the opportunity to touch someone somewhere in the world by
Right.
saying something super cool through this thing right here. It's so cool. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to take the chance to make an impact, even if it's one person in China that you'll never meet? There's a person in China that heard your content and will now know how to interact with blind people, or will now know how to, you know, one of the biggest issues I had about the blind community was when they were crapping all over Molly Burke. And I had such an issue with that because I was like, bro, I don't care how she made it. She made it. She's one of us. Like, we should be propping her up. We should be applauding this. This is a celebration. None of our blind folks in our community has made it at that scale. Why would you hate on that? You know what I'm saying? And so for me, I'm very consistent in that because I believe there is plenty of money to go around, and I believe that there is also plenty of opportunity for you to deliver a message that can be impactful.
There is plenty of those things to go around. And I think that there is such a major, like I've noticed it, especially, and I'm sure you've seen it too, especially in our community. There's this idea of like competition, like, oh, well, I have to. And it's like, no, like, this is one of the things I love that, like, for instance, you and me, right? When we got connected, like, it wasn't like, "Oh, I see you're trying to do this and you stole my idea for this idea." You know what I mean? Or you stole this plan I had, which I personally feel that it's so crucial in, smaller communities or minority communities especially too, to like not instead of like shitting on other people for something that they are doing or something that you think that they shouldn't have done, which like Molly Burke is a completely different topic and I don't want us to go into that, but like it's one of those things where
Let's keep it a buck. I would love to go into that with you one day.
I mean we can because
Not on the
I
pod,
have.
not on the pod.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I would
yeah,
love
of
for you.
course, of course, of
I would
course.
love to do that.
Yeah, for sure. But my phone fell. Okay,
You know, I had
it's
our
gonna stay on
mutual.
the
You know,
floor.
I had our mutual friend Diana.
Yeah.
Now, I grew up with Diana. Diana and I were really, really good friends through high school, and we kind of
Yeah.
talked through high school and kind of helped each other out. Navigate the complexities of going into college as blind kids, right? As blind
Mhm.
students. And so Diana's always been a friend. I've known Diana since 2007, 8.
I think
Really
that's how you
crazy.
found my
And
stuff, isn't it?
exactly, it's how
Because
I
of
found
Diana?
you. That's how I
Yeah.
found you because I know you guys linked through the whole YouTube thing.
Mhm.
But I had her on to my podcast a couple years ago with my buddy Adam, who passed away. We had the Comfortably Poor
Mhm.
podcast. Uh, we had her on to discuss what her issues were with Molly Burke, and we held her feet to the fire, and I think we did a great job. And I think she also did a great job to present her position as to speak to why the community didn't, really support her, or didn't really vibe with her like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Um
think it's
I
interesting.
mean that's like one of the things we connected on is like Molly Burke and kind
Yes.
of like talking about those things. So I think it was just so funny like how we were able to connect, but um I think that, like I was saying previously too, is when you meet people that are in the same field as you, in the same industry, doing the same thing as you
Mm-hmm.
in their own way. I think that's why it's so important that we have partnership and we're able
Yes.
to say, you know what, I'm not gonna shit on your podcast, the Blind Radio Guy podcast, just because, you're doing X, Y, and Z a certain type of way. Like I'd rather us say like, you know what, instead, why don't we team up to do something cool, like for both of our podcasts, for both of our social media? And I think that that's a really rare thing to find because not a lot of people want to have those conversations. They'd rather say, "Oh no, I don't give a shit. I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to team up with
Yeah.
that person because they're doing this thing this type of way and I don't agree with X, Y, and Z and whatever." So, yeah, I just think that in communities it's so crucial to build people up and like I said, Molly Brick's a different thing. And but other than that, yeah, I 100% agree with what you said about like partnership and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I also think that, the only way to succeed is to understand that what you do is temporarily for you, right? It is temporarily for you. You want to produce this content. You want to see the execution of the things that you're doing and be like, "Damn, that's cool. I did that shit. That's dope." Like I
Exactly.
really am glad I put that video out. And oh my goodness, I got this, you get the adrenaline. I got the like, the comment. This was really good. You go, keep up the great work. That stuff pushes you to continue to do more. But when you start looking at your projects and the future of them, and you start to say, there's a bigger picture here. You know what I'm saying? Like me teaming up with Gabby and teaming up with other blind creators is not only creating a huge thing that's going to be seen by more people because there's more hands, there's more things going on, but also we're inspiring the next generation to just do it. And also we're spreading the message of positivity to say like, yo, see, this is what happens. This is what you can get when you link up with other people who think like you and who want the same things as you. So,
Yeah, you got to say that for the people in the back cuz I
facts.
think doing it for like doing it for the next generation is why I started all of this. Like I didn't grow up with people in media that I could look up to that were representing
Mhm.
the community in a certain
Mhm.
way. So for me, like when I started doing all of this, it was a matter of, okay, who do I want to inspire? And I essentially want to inspire everybody, but especially the younger girls, the younger boys, the teenagers coming up that are like, damn, and I've even met a bunch of them. Like, I forget who I was talking to about it. Oh, it was on a podcast I was featured on. I was sharing like how, because I'm also doing motivational speaking. So like when I would do these panels and stuff, I would meet these parents who would come crying to me because they had a 5 or a 6 year old daughter or a son that, recently went blind. And obviously as a parent who's experiencing that for the first time, like they were in awe, and it just like those conversations need to keep happening around
Mhm.
the world. And I don't think that people understand half of the time why it's so important to uplift the younger generation. Like I said on that podcast, like they really are the future, and for you to not want to build them up in a way, whether it's speaking through this microphone or it's getting on camera to say something or it's going out and doing a show or a panel or whatever, it's like eventually those little kids are going to grow up to be just like us. They're going to be blind adults,
You know,
right? Like,
I
yeah.
I'm in a band
Mhm.
and I just got to play. We just got the opportunity to play for the kids at Perkins School for the Blind
Mhm.
in Boston, right? Very famous, very well
Awesome.
known blind school in the country, right? Like one of the most famous schools. It was such a beautiful opportunity, and I didn't realize how much it was going to really touch what I had done there
Yeah.
until I left. And I started reflecting and thinking about the moments I had with the kids after the show, and just them coming up to me and them just being so mesmerized and just thinking like, my God, I wonder what I would have felt if I saw a band of blind people with
Right.
full equipment, full professionals traveling and playing music. Like, I wonder how that would have impacted me the way that I'm impacting these kids. You start looking at life a little differently, Gabby. You do. You do.
Yeah.
When you do
I
stuff
second
like
that.
that, that's crazy stuff. And it's really impactful. And I'll never forget those kids. I'll never forget, the moment I had with them and them being so like they were just beaming. They're like, you're playing the bass. That's so cool, and I
Yeah.
love the drummer. And man, the drummer and the fills that they were doing is so cool. And all of you guys are blind. What? And they were just so taken aback. And I think I don't. That's not gonna hit me or them until later, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're gonna go as 20 something year olds, probably in a podcast interview. Right, on a YouTube channel, talking about
Exactly.
talking about the time that they met these blind musicians that played at their school when they were kids. And
Mhm.
I just think that's so cool. And that's what this is all about, man. That's what this is all about. Stop, let go of the ego. It's not about
Yes.
you. It'll never be about you, really.
Yeah.
It never will be, because if that's the case, then don't put it out. Just leave it for yourself, record for yourself, save it, and then hit play on it on your own phone, right? If it's
Yeah.
truly just for you. But if you want to make an impact, and you want to change the world around you, or you want to make note in the world that there are people who are blind who are actually killing the game, do it and keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, you're so right. These kids are gonna grow up and be like, "Man, like," and this is what, like, I have an idea which we'll talk about because we've been doing so many collaborative things together, but
Yes.
like it's so important that we put these messages out about impact and inclusion and inspiration, and like not only that, but like don't just say the things. Like if you meet these kids, you meet these teenagers, whatever, like show them and have these conversations, and that's why like when I meet these parents at these panels and things that I've done, like they always tell me like you have no idea like how much my kid needed to hear you talk about whatever, like whether it was me starting to make content, whether it was me, being bullied as a little girl, whether it was me, like whatever it was, they always tell me like we needed to hear that so much
Did you get
because
bullied?
this is what they're going through. Yeah, I was
You
bullied.
got bullied bad, huh?
Mm, I want to say so. Yeah, it definitely left an impact on me for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And you go to school in New York?
Yeah, yeah.
Gabby, that's so wild to me. Where'd you go to
Kids
school?
are mean, man.
Where'd you go to
What can I
school?
say?
Did you go to a school in Queens?
No, no, no. It was in middle school. I was a little 10-year-old
Where in New York?
in Queens.
In Queens. So you went to public school in Queens.
Mhm.
It's just
First
so.
and only blind student. Well, actually, it was the second blind student.
I say that only because I didn't really experience bullying, and I grew up 30 minutes outside of where you live, where you grew up.
Mhm.
I didn't experience bullying. I think the worst I ever got was, and I'm pretty sure it's different for boys and girls, but I
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
I know men got bullied, severely bullied, blind men throughout the years that I've met. But I also believe that this is why it's very important that you present yourself very confidently,
Yeah.
because nobody really messed with me, and I'm not saying that to like I'm a tough guy. I wasn't a tough guy. It was just I really had no problem using my mouth. I wasn't scared about using my mouth. I think there was a time at third grade. I remember this one kid. He was hitting me. He kept like hitting me and then going to sit down. Right, like he was slapping me. So I
Mhm.
went to hit him, and I knew it was him. Uh, and so when I did that, he came to choke me out. He went to go put his arm around me and try to choke me out.
What?
And But like I had no problem getting up and slapping him and hitting him. You know what I mean? Like that was his retaliation. His retaliation was putting his arms around my neck and trying to choke me out.
Right.
But, I still got up and hit him. And like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, ultimately some shit turned on me because I couldn't see him coming, but I still had no problem getting up and letting him know, yo, I will land a hit in, yo. I will
Yeah,
land a
yeah.
hit in, and so I think how you present yourself is so important. I talk about confidence. I talk about the way that you present yourself a lot of the time because my mom used to tell me all the time, walk with your head up because people will take
Mm-hmm.
advantage of you if they see that your head is down, your shoulders are down. They see that
Right.
as weak. That's a target. That's a target. And so that really stuck with me. Growing up, that really, really stuck with me. And then I was very, very outspoken in high school. People would say mean things. They would say stuff about my cane or make comments about my cane. Oh, you put that cane in between my legs and blah, blah, blah. Down the hall, obviously, they're going to say that. Then I
Mm-hmm.
had no problem calling them the C word, screaming the
Yeah.
C word down the hallway. And even if a teacher
Yeah.
was there or not, I did not care. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like if you're gonna be mean, well, I'm going to be mean too, and I'm going to say curse words, and nobody's going to say a bad an eye because they were like, well, you were talking shit about his cane first. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like, what are you going to really do? So, no, it's just so crazy, and it's so sad when I hear about, stories like yours where you got bullied. My lady got bullied too. My wife got bullied as well
Um,
in school, and she talks about it in her book, and she talks about it. And it's just it's sad. It's sad that happens, and kids are shit.
yeah.
But
I love how he transitions from "please stick up for the kids" to
I
"nah,
don't. Oh,
these kids,
shit!
man."
Fuck those kids. But because it just goes back to like everybody has a favorite. Like I hate when parents say that they don't have a favorite. They have a favorite kid. They know one of their
Oh
kids
yes,
is a
they
little
do.
shit. Come on, what are we doing here?
They do.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I think confidence is so important, and that's why, like, for me, like, when I tell these stories about when I was bullied, like, at that point I didn't know what the hell confidence looked like.
Sure.
I didn't know what that looked like for me. But then the older I got, when people would say things about me in high school, I used to turn around and I would say really bad things back to them, and I didn't care because I was like, I'm not taking that shit anymore. Like, I'm older now, I know how to defend myself, I know how to stick up for myself. So, like, I think you're right. Like, confidence is so important. And so just even like, I think, I don't know, I had an issue where, like, I wouldn't even share it with my family. Like, I was just like, "Ah, I'll deal with it." I never dealt with it that much because the teachers at my school sucked. But, like,
Wow.
it was one of those things where it taught me so much. I think it essentially left a big impact on me, but it also taught me so much about how to stick up for myself, how to not take people's shit,
Yeah.
because it was just like, yeah, they're gonna bully you because you're blind. They're gonna make fun of you because of X, Y, and Z. They're gonna, like, whatever. But
Sure.
then the older I got, when people would be like, "Oh, like, if I was blind, I would, like, unalive myself." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay."
I love when people say that to me because I'm like,
I
wow, you
know.
have no will to live at all. Like
Literally
none, zero.
0. So for me, it was just like, I remember in college, like, somebody said something about me, and I, like, overheard it as I was, like, walking back upstairs. And I literally didn't give two shits. I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's funny, hilarious." That I
Yeah.
don't know what you were expecting me to say. Like, were you wanting me to cry? Or were you wanting me to,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I
No,
mean? Like,
I
so
love that. I love hearing that. I definitely talked to shit to teachers too, because teachers
yeah.
were not always right either. I remember
No, not at all.
specifically in 8th grade, I had this bitch of a math teacher. I'll never forget her freaking name, Donna Perino. Fuck you, Donna. All right, because no, she was such a bitch. And I'll never forget one day I was going up the steps on the right side. Okay? You
Yeah.
go up on the right, you come down on the right, right?
On the right, yeah.
So she's at the top of the steps. I'm coming up on the right hand side. She
Yeah.
starts to walk down and literally tells me, "You're walking on the wrong side, Daniel." And I was like, no, I'm not walking on the wrong side, Donna. And she was like, oh. And then walked down to the right side, her right side.
Oh my
Exactly, bitch.
gosh.
Like in 8th grade, I still had that in me. I had that.
Yeah.
It was very, very fortunate to have grown up with a mom who told me to speak up for myself, and it
Mhm.
worked, and it worked. And sometimes you have situations like that where, like, you recognize the teacher's not always right either. They're a human being. They're going to say some stupid shit because they're not thinking in the moment. And so
Exactly.
you know, I always say one of the reasons why I feel like I grew up fast was because I hated being treated like a kid. And
Mm.
I just hated, and I think that stunted a lot of things. I feel like it's probably why I don't have much of an imagination nowadays in my older years, and why I don't really care for like sci-fi and fantasy and fiction, and I don't care for all that. I want realism in my stuff. But
Yeah.
but truthfully, I also really think it helped me to stick up for myself and be very authoritative uh, uh, when it came to what I wanted, and
Yeah.
and I think that's so important. And I wish people really grew up with that. I wish more people grew up with the ability to speak that way for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you shared a story about a bitch of a teacher. I remember, like, once I finally started telling my mom, because my family was and still is very much that way of like, you need to speak up for yourself. Like, don't let these people walk all
Yes,
over you just because you're blind and they think that you're weak. Like, of course, in fifth grade, like, I wasn't sharing those moments
of
of like, oh, I
course,
was being bullied at
of
school
course.
because I was just like, oh, fuck these kids, I don't care anymore, whatever. And so, but like once I finally shared it with her, I remember it was like my school used to do these carnival things like towards the end of the year. And I was walking in the like where we had recess outside, and this teacher who literally was like my height, like she was so short. I was like, is she a student? Like what the hell? And so I remember I like I think I hit her with my cane by accident because I was like walking. And when I tell you, Danny, this woman turned around, she's like, "Watch where the fuck you're going." I was like, "Excuse me?"
Oh
I was
my
like, "What did you just
god.
say to me?" I was like, she's like, "You need
Oh,
to watch where you're going." I was like, "Ma'am, I would if I could see, but clearly you're the blind one because you didn't even turn around to like pay attention to who was behind you. Like, how are you gonna get mad at me?" I barely even hit her with my cane.
oh
I like,
my
when you like
god.
tap somebody with on the foot with your cane, like, okay,
Yeah. Oh
it was like the
no.
craziest thing. And like I remember there was a teacher, she's like a para for one of the other students. She was with me, and this woman, like, she was one of those people that didn't take anybody's shit. Like, she also went off on this lady. She went off on this lady. Like, I will never forget that. Like, I was like, oh shit. I was like, well, damn. Like, I didn't even need to say anything. She was just
Yeah.
like after she went off on her, I was just like, okay,
People,
like,
you know
yeah.
what? It was such a different world back then, and I'm gonna leave you on this. It was such a different world back then, Gabby, because
Yeah.
the way people would show up and start yelling at teachers is crazy to me.
Crazy.
Crazy. I will never forget there was this security guard, and this is such a funny story. This just goes to show, how crazy people can be, but also how nice they can be. There was
Yeah.
this one woman, she was the security guard of my elementary school, and I don't know what it was, but that lady never really bothered me. She was kind of bitchy, but like, she never really bothered me, you know what I mean? But one day she said something really annoying to me about my cane, and so I went back home and I tell my mom, I tell my grandma, bad fucking idea. Bad fucking idea, okay?
Yes. I remember those moments for myself too.
Oh, they showed up to the school the next day,
Yes.
top of the morning, and they let that lady have it.
Have it.
Have it. I mean, in her face, at her desk. They let that lady have it, yo. And I'll never
Wild.
forget it. And they ended up feeling so bad about it at the end of the school year. They ended up buying her a couple things, like a doll and some other things too.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
how crazy
Those
is
are the
that?
best moments when like people in your family come to the school because you told them
And
some
they
shit
turn
went down
up,
with a teacher.
and
Like that's the best.
oh, it's the best. Oh, it's the best. I had to stop telling because my. I remember one time it happened in middle school, and I
Yeah.
went to go tell my grandma. My grandma calls my mom. She's like, "We gotta go down to the school," and I'm like, "All right, no, we don't. Like, I'm in middle school now. We don't have to go down to the school anymore."
No. Yeah, no. Even to this day, like I remember in college, there was a professor that slammed the door in my face, and yeah, he didn't ever hear the end of it because my I
Oh
told
my
my brother
god.
because I was having a meeting with like the accessibilities director and our like dean of students the next morning, and I never told them that my brother was gonna be coming. I just literally I came to school like regular, like nothing else was happening. I went to the meeting and my brother like texted me. He's like, "Hey, I'm downstairs," and I was like, "Oh, so sorry, my brother's downstairs. He's coming to the meeting." They were like, "Huh?" I was like, "Oh yeah." Like they were not expecting him to walk in, and like he was like suited up, like he was so professional and everything, and he was like, "Listen, like my sister doesn't ever complain about professors like that. Like what do you think this is? Like, you know what I mean?" So I just think it's so crazy. But yeah, is there anything else you want to like share with everybody? I mean, I know you're into music also, like
My god,
anything fun
yeah.
you have going on?
I have so much happening, and you know, you could follow me all over social media: TikTok, Instagram. I still use Twitter, and I'm still gonna call it Twitter. Blind Radio Guy. That's everywhere I am actively. I love Twitter. It's where you're gonna see my most unfiltered thoughts. But I am on Instagram. I put a lot of stuff up on TikTok from the podcast. I also am a podcast producer with the goal in mind to create a podcast consulting company, and then of course have a network under my podcast consulting company of amazing podcasters and creators and content creators in the blind space who I really believe can make an impact. And so that's eventually my bigger goal down the road. I currently produce the podcast Babies Down, Bottles Up, and it's a podcast for blind moms. And they're just such incredible ladies, and I have such an incredible team with them. And we're building something incredibly special for them and for resources for blind parents. And I think it's just a beautiful thing that's happening there. And I'm also in a band, and we're a 6-piece band from all over the country. Mid-air Decision, and we have our first single coming out within the month. Hopefully, we're gonna make all that happen. But if not, it's gonna be coming out within the end of the year. Okay, so this last quarter, our first hit. Our first hit single. So, really excited about that. And 6 of us in the band, 5 of us are blind. One of them is sighted. And 3 of them are Berklee College of Music graduates from Boston. So, just very fortunate to have my hand in so many projects that are just going to make such an impact. I'm so excited. I feel really good, and I'm very happy where I am in my life right now.
That's awesome. I mean, and then you, me, and Amanda, our previous guests, we have some projects coming up too with
We
each other.
do,
So
we do, we do. Got a lot of hands in and stuff like that because you guys,
yeah,
I believe in you guys. You guys are so great.
I appreciate that. Well, links will all be down below. So Danny, don't forget to send me those links. And yeah, be sure to follow him on Instagram, Twitter, his podcast, check out his band, check out everything that he mentioned previously, and stay tuned for more episodes coming soon. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
Bye.